Hannah Mitchell had always believed in doing things by the book. After spending nearly a decade climbing the ranks in one of the nation's largest retail corporations, she had finally reached a point in life where dreams of homeownership no longer felt out of reach. Meticulous by nature, she spent months researching neighborhoods, property taxes, school districts, even though she didn't have children yet, and community profiles. She wasn't one to jump into anything unprepared, especially something as life-altering as buying her first house. When she came across the listing for the charming craftsman-style home in the picturesque town of Cedar Ridge, she knew almost instantly it was the one. Set on a corner lot shaded by mature sycamores with a wraparound porch and a spacious backyard perfect for weekend gatherings, it was everything she had envisioned. The sale had gone smoothly. No liens, no prior disputes, and a clean inspection report. Her agent reassured her that the property wasn't subject to any restrictive covenants beyond standard city ordinances. The neighborhood had an informal association of sorts, a local group of longtime residents who liked to maintain the look and feel of the community. But there was no mandatory membership or formal approval process for new owners. Hannah, pragmatic as ever, filed that fact away without much thought. Moving day dawned clear and brisk, the early spring air holding a slight chill despite the sun's warmth. Hannah arrived early with a team of professional movers she had hired through a vetted agency. They worked efficiently, unloading box after box, furniture wrapped in protective blankets, carefully maneuvered through the wide front door. By mid-morning, the house was abuzz with activity. Delivery trucks coming and going. The soft hum of a power drill as the cable technician installed her internet service, and the muted sound of a conversation between the movers as they organized the living room. Hannah wore jeans and a loose sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a practical ponytail, clipboard in hand as she checked off inventory items and directed where each piece of furniture should go. It was just past noon when the first sign of trouble appeared. A sharp knock at the open front door broke through the din of moving noise. Hannah turned to see an impeccably dressed woman standing on the porch, arms crossed, her lips pursed in a tight, disapproving line. Her crisp white blouse and tailored slacks screamed suburban authority, and the chunky gold bracelet on her wrist clinked softly as she adjusted her stance. Hannah set her clipboard aside and approached, offering a polite smile. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" The woman didn't return the smile. Instead, her eyes darted past Hannah, scanning the interior of the house as though cataloging potential infractions. "I'm Karen Ellis," she announced, her voice clipped. "I live 3 doors down. I chair the neighborhood association." She emphasized the last part as if it carried the weight of official government. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped over the threshold and into the foyer, gaze sweeping the stacks of moving boxes and the disassembled bed frames propped against the wall. Hannah blinked, momentarily thrown by the woman's abruptness. "I'm Hannah Mitchell," she replied calmly, moving to subtly block Karen's path further into the house. "I closed on this property last week. We're in the process of moving in today." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I wasn't informed of any pending sale. The association typically reviews and welcomes new residents to ensure compatibility with community standards." Hannah maintained her even tone. "The sale was public. I worked through a licensed agent and followed all city and county requirements. As far as I'm aware, there's no formal association approval process required here." Karen's nostrils flared slightly. "That may be your understanding, but as chair of the association, I oversee neighborhood affairs. Given that none of us were notified, I must ask for documentation proving your legal right to occupy this property." It took Hannah a beat to process the audacity of the demand. She kept her composure. "I'm happy to provide any verification needed, but I won't be doing so under informal demand. My agent can confirm all the necessary filings are in order. If you'd like, I can provide their contact information." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "We'll see about that. I'll be contacting the county office myself. For now, I suggest you halt further move-in activity until this is clarified." Hannah's smile thinned. "I'm afraid that won't be happening. I've taken possession of this home legally and have every right to proceed. If you have concerns, I suggest you take them through the proper channels." Karen's expression hardened. "I see." Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode off the porch. Hannah exhaled slowly, adrenaline prickling beneath her skin. She brushed off the encounter and refocused on the move. But an hour later, 2 marked police cars pulled up to the curb. The sight sent a fresh jolt through her. 2 uniformed officers approached, one speaking into his shoulder radio. Hannah met them at the porch, documents in hand. "Ma'am, we received a report of a potential burglary in progress at this address," the senior officer explained. Hannah handed over her deed and identification without hesitation. "I closed on this home last week. We're moving in today. I can provide my agent's contact info if needed." The officer reviewed the documents, exchanged a glance with his partner, and nodded. "Everything appears to be in order. Apologies for the inconvenience, ma'am." He paused. "Just out of curiosity, do you know a Karen Ellis?" Hannah allowed herself a dry smile. "We met about an hour ago." The officer sighed. "That explains it. You're not the first new homeowner to experience resistance. If you have any further trouble, don't hesitate to contact us." The officers departed, but the mood of the day had shifted. Hannah found herself glancing over her shoulder as she resumed work. The movers worked a bit faster, sensing the tension in the air. By late afternoon, as the last of the furniture was brought inside, Hannah noticed Karen standing across the street, arms folded, eyes fixed on her house. That evening, as dusk settled and the last of the moving crew departed, Hannah sat on the front porch with a cup of tea, exhaustion tugging at her limbs. The house was hers now, legally and fully. Yet, an undercurrent of unease remained. Karen's challenge had been more than neighborly nosiness. It was a territorial assertion, a warning. Hannah knew better than to ignore such signals. Her instincts, honed over years of corporate navigation, told her this was far from over. As night fell and the streetlights flickered on, Hannah locked the doors, her mind already calculating her next steps. She would not be intimidated. The law was on her side, and she intended to ensure it stayed that way. The first shot had been fired, but the battle for her rightful place in this community had only just begun. The following morning, Hannah rose early, determined to shake off the previous day's unease. She made a strong pot of coffee and set about unpacking the kitchen, methodically organizing cabinets and drawers. Outside, the street was quiet, bathed in the soft light of dawn. It felt good to focus on the tangible, on tasks she could control. Yet, beneath her calm surface, the memory of the police visit lingered, as did the image of Karen standing watch across the street. Hannah wasn't naive. She knew a message had been sent, however thinly veiled. By mid-morning, a new delivery truck arrived with the last of her furniture and some appliances. The crew began unloading without incident. But as Hannah signed the delivery receipt, one of the workers mentioned something odd. "Hey, ma'am, some lady across the street was taking photos of us when we pulled up. Thought you should know." Hannah's stomach tightened. She thanked him and returned inside, her mind already turning over the implications. An hour later, while unboxing in the living room, she noticed that her Wi-Fi wasn't connecting. Puzzled, she checked the router. No signal. Her service appointment had been completed the day before. Everything had tested fine. Hannah contacted her internet provider. After a brief hold, a customer service rep informed her that a disconnection order had been placed that morning, supposedly by the account holder. Hannah quickly clarified that she had made no such request and asked for details. The rep apologized but could not provide further information, citing privacy protocols. Furious but composed, Hannah scheduled a service call to reinstate her connection. As she hung up, a flicker of anger ignited. Someone had impersonated her to interfere with her utilities. Determined to stay ahead, Hannah contacted her real estate agent, Lisa, updating her on the developments. Lisa listened intently. "I've seen this sort of harassment before," she said grimly. "Document everything. Keep records. And, if you haven't already, file a formal complaint with the police about the impersonation attempt." Hannah agreed. After their call, she compiled a detailed timeline of events since move-in and headed to the local precinct. At the station, she met with an officer who took her report seriously. The impersonation of a utility customer was no trivial matter. The officer advised her to notify all her service providers to place additional verification measures on her accounts, which Hannah did immediately upon returning home. It was a smart move, one she knew would help shield her from further sabotage. That afternoon, as she stepped out to check her mailbox, Hannah found a plain manila envelope wedged inside, bearing no postage or return address. Inside were several printed pages on association letterhead, an unofficial notice stating that her occupancy status was under review, pending further investigation of compliance with community standards. The letter was unsigned with no official contact information and riddled with vague references to bylaws and guidelines. It was clearly an intimidation tactic. Hannah scanned the pages, her jaw tightening with resolve. So, Lisa called again shortly after. "I've been doing some digging," she said. "Karen Ellis is well known around here. She's not officially part of the city council or any governing body, but she throws her weight around. She's got influence, mostly through old connections and local favors. You're smart to handle this by the book." Hannah thanked her and assured her she was taking every step carefully. Still, the fact that Karen could so easily sow chaos was unsettling. Later that day, a crew arrived to install new kitchen cabinetry, a project Hannah had scheduled weeks in advance. But after a brief conversation with someone over the phone, the lead installer approached her, visibly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we've been advised to postpone the job. Apparently, there's a pending property dispute flagged with the city." Hannah stared at him in disbelief. "That's not true," she said firmly. "There is no dispute. Everything is legally recorded and verified." The installer apologized again but insisted he had to follow instructions from his office. They packed up and left. The disruption infuriated Hannah, not because of the inconvenience, she could handle delays, but because someone was actively undermining her ability to settle into her home. Someone was spreading false information, damaging her reputation with local businesses, and trying to isolate her within the community. That evening, she contacted her corporate legal department. Though they couldn't take on her case directly, they provided a referral to a well-regarded property attorney, a woman named Marissa Grant, who specialized in real estate harassment cases. Hannah reached out to Marissa the next morning. After a thorough initial consultation, Marissa laid out a clear course of action. "First," she said, "we'll send a formal cease and desist letter to Karen Ellis and the association. Second, I'll request official clarification from the city regarding your property status, just to get it in writing and close any potential loopholes. Third, I recommend placing security measures around your property, not just for safety, but to document any future harassment." Marissa's professional, no-nonsense approach reassured Hannah. Finally, she wasn't navigating this alone. That same day, Hannah scheduled an appointment with a reputable security company to install motion-activated lighting and discrete surveillance cameras covering key areas around her property. Not to spy, but to ensure an accurate record should further incidents occur. Meanwhile, the small acts of intimidation continued. One morning, Hannah awoke to find her trash bins overturned, their contents strewn across the driveway. Another day, her mail was mysteriously wet and torn, though the forecast had been clear. Each incident was petty on its own, but the cumulative effect was deliberate and chilling. Through it all, Hannah kept meticulous records. Every odd occurrence, every piece of unsolicited communication, every canceled service or missed delivery, she logged them with dates, times, and photos where applicable. Her background in corporate operations had trained her to manage crises with discipline and foresight, and she applied those same skills here. A week after their initial meeting, Marissa filed the formal cease and desist. The letter was sent via certified mail, with copies to the local police and city clerk's office. It cited legal statutes regarding property rights and harassment, leaving no room for misinterpretation. A day later, Hannah noticed an unusual vehicle idling near her home, a dark SUV with out-of-state plates. It lingered for nearly an hour, its occupant occasionally glancing at the house. When Hannah finally approached, phone in hand, ready to call the police, the SUV pulled away. The message was clear: surveillance, an attempt to intimidate. That evening, Lisa called with another update. Word around town is that Karen is pushing a narrative that you're a problem neighbor, someone trying to disrupt the community's harmony. It's ridiculous, of course, but people are starting to whisper. Hannah sighed. She had expected resistance, but the sheer pettiness and malice of the campaign astounded her. Determined to fight back with integrity, she leaned on Marissa's guidance and the support of her professional network. Her next step would be to attend the upcoming city council meeting, open to all residents, and publicly affirm her legal ownership of the property. She had no intention of retreating. As the sun set on another turbulent day, Hannah sat once more on her porch, the air cool against her skin. Her resolve had only strengthened. The battle had escalated. But she was ready. She had done everything by the book, and she would continue to do so no matter how many obstacles were thrown in her path. The gauntlet had been thrown, and Hannah Mitchell was prepared to meet it head-on. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted just days after Marissa's cease-and-desist letter had been delivered. Hannah awoke early that Friday, determined to begin making her new home feel lived in despite the ongoing disruptions. She brewed a pot of coffee, opened her laptop, and settled into a stack of emails for work. The morning was quiet, save for the occasional birdsong and the distant hum of traffic. For a brief moment, it seemed as though things might be settling down. That illusion was shattered mid-morning when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar but local. When she answered, a clipped voice informed her that a formal complaint had been filed against her property with the city zoning office, citing violations of residential usage restrictions and unauthorized modifications. The caller, an assistant at the zoning department, sounded almost apologetic as she explained that an inspection had been scheduled in response to the complaint. Hannah's pulse quickened. She thanked the assistant for the courtesy call and immediately contacted Marissa. Marissa was unsurprised. "This is a classic pressure tactic," she said. "They're trying to create a paper trail of alleged non-compliance to use against you. The good news is that your property file is clean. I'll coordinate with the zoning office and ensure that the inspector is fully briefed." Still, the fact that Karen had escalated to filing an official municipal complaint underscored the lengths she was willing to go. That afternoon, a delivery Hannah had scheduled, a custom dining set, was inexplicably canceled. When she called the vendor, the representative hesitated before explaining that they had received a notice of disputed property status from an anonymous source and, as a precaution, had decided to halt the order. Hannah felt her jaw clench in frustration. Someone, Karen no doubt, was contacting her contractors and vendors under false pretenses, sowing doubt and fear. She logged the incident and forwarded the details to Marissa. That evening, Hannah heard the hum of voices outside and glanced through her front window. A small cluster of neighbors had gathered on Karen's lawn. Karen, standing at the center, gestured animatedly toward Hannah's house, her voice carrying across the quiet street. Though Hannah couldn't make out every word, phrases like "didn't follow proper channels" and "threat to our community values" reached her ears. The display was calculated, designed to isolate her socially and erode any goodwill she might have hoped to build with her new neighbors. The following day, another unsettling event occurred. Hannah had arranged for a landscape crew to begin restoring the overgrown backyard. They arrived promptly, but less than an hour into their work, a uniformed code enforcement officer appeared, responding to an anonymous tip about unauthorized grading and land alteration. The crew was ordered to stop work pending verification of permits. Permits Hannah knew were unnecessary for the minor work being performed. Still, the interruption succeeded in delaying the project and adding another layer of stress. Marissa worked swiftly, filing formal objections and contacting relevant city departments to correct the record. Yet, the pace of harassment continued to increase. Hannah began receiving unsolicited letters from a local Neighborhood Standards Committee, a group she had never heard of, citing various supposed infractions: improper window treatments, non-conforming paint colors, excessive use of outdoor lighting. The accusations were absurd and baseless, but the letters were clearly designed to intimidate. Meanwhile, subtle forms of vandalism began to appear. One morning, Hannah discovered deep scratches along the side of her car, parked in her own driveway. Another evening, she returned from a quick grocery run to find her porch light bulb smashed, shards of glass littering the steps. The incidents, though minor in isolation, formed a pattern of calculated harassment. Hannah documented each one meticulously, forwarding evidence to both Marissa and the police. One particularly alarming development occurred when a stranger arrived at her door under the pretense of conducting a home energy audit, supposedly mandated by the city. The man had no official identification and became evasive when pressed for details. Hannah, sensing danger, refused him entry and contacted the police immediately. The responding officer praised her caution and confirmed that no such audit had been authorized. The encounter left her shaken but resolved. The breaking point came when Hannah received a notice scheduling a mandatory appearance before the association's grievance committee. The letter, unsigned but stamped with an association logo, accused her of ongoing violations and demanded her attendance to resolve matters of community concern. Marissa advised her to decline participation, citing the association's lack of formal jurisdiction over her property. Instead, Marissa prepared a formal response outlining Hannah's legal rights and rejecting the committee's authority. That weekend, Hannah noticed an unfamiliar utility truck idling near her property. The driver appeared to be taking photos. When approached, he claimed to be surveying lines for an upcoming project but could provide no work order or official identification. Once again, Hannah documented the encounter and reported it to the police. The officer who responded, a different one this time, confirmed her growing concerns. "This is starting to look like a coordinated campaign," he said. "You're doing the right thing, documenting everything. We're keeping an eye on it." As the weeks passed, the pressure campaign showed no signs of abating. More than once, Hannah awoke to find her trash bins knocked over, their contents strewn across the lawn. On another occasion, a dead animal, clearly placed deliberately, was found near her back fence. The escalation of tactics was disturbing, but Hannah refused to be driven out. Instead, she doubled down on her strategy of legal recourse and meticulous documentation. Marissa, recognizing the need to push back more forcefully, filed an official complaint with the county district attorney's office, citing potential criminal harassment and abuse of municipal processes. At the same time, she reached out to trusted contacts in local government, ensuring that Hannah's side of the story was heard. The result was a quiet but growing awareness among key officials that the campaign against Hannah was both improper and potentially unlawful. Through it all, Hannah maintained her composure. She continued to work her demanding corporate job by day and manage the complexities of her embattled home life by night. The stress was unrelenting, but her resolve only deepened. Each attempt to undermine her only reinforced her commitment to stand firm. Then, late one evening, an unmarked envelope appeared on her porch. Inside was a crude, unsigned letter warning her to leave before it's too late. The threat, though cowardly, marked a new and dangerous turn. Hannah immediately reported it to the police, who treated the matter with the seriousness it deserved. A patrol car began making regular passes by her house, and Hannah installed additional security measures on Marissa's advice. The first escalation had become a war of attrition, one that tested Hannah's endurance and resilience daily. But she was not alone. With Marissa's unwavering support, the backing of the police, and her own unshakable sense of justice, she prepared for the next phase of the battle. Karen Ellis had underestimated her, believing that intimidation and social pressure would be enough to force her out. But Hannah Mitchell had no intention of backing down. If anything, she was more determined than ever to assert her rightful place in the community, not through conflict, but through steadfast adherence to the law and the principles she lived by. By the third week of sustained harassment, the strain had begun to wear on Hannah, though she refused to let it show. Each day brought a new provocation, yet she faced them with disciplined resolve. The pattern was clear now. Karen Ellis was escalating, seeking to break her through a war of attrition that combined social isolation, municipal pressure, and personal intimidation. But Hannah was equally determined, methodically countering each move with legal precision and an unwavering commitment to due process. The turning point came when Marissa informed her that the city zoning inspector assigned to follow up on the fabricated complaint had been swayed by the flurry of misinformation circulating within municipal channels. A formal notice arrived by certified mail, announcing an official property inspection scheduled for the following Tuesday. The stated purpose was to verify compliance with residential zoning ordinances and structural code requirements. The language was deliberately vague but carried enough weight to signal serious intent. Marissa, sensing the significance of this move, advised Hannah to prepare meticulously. "They're fishing for anything they can twist into a violation," she warned. "We need to ensure they find nothing amiss." Together, they reviewed every aspect of the property's compliance status. Marissa brought in a trusted independent inspector to conduct a preemptive audit, verifying that all installations, renovations, and structural elements were fully up to code. The report came back clean, but the effort underscored how high the stakes had become. On the day of the inspection, Hannah took leave from work to be present. 2 city officials arrived, accompanied by an unsmiling man who introduced himself as a community liaison, a title with no clear authority but unmistakable intent. Hannah recognized him from the crowd that had gathered on Karen's lawn the previous weekend. The inspection proceeded under Hannah's watchful eye. She answered questions courteously but firmly, corrected inaccuracies when necessary, and documented the entire process on Marissa's advice. Though the inspectors conducted their work professionally, it was evident they had arrived primed to expect trouble. When the inspection concluded without any citations, Hannah allowed herself a small measure of satisfaction. But the battle was far from over. The following day, a new wave of anonymous complaints surfaced, this time alleging that Hannah was operating a business from her home without the proper licenses, a blatant fabrication. The claim triggered a notice from the City Business Licensing Office requiring her to respond formally. The effort to entangle her in regulatory red tape was transparent but effective in draining time and resources. Meanwhile, the social ostracism orchestrated by Karen intensified. Longtime residents who had previously greeted Hannah with polite curiosity now crossed the street to avoid her. Invitations to neighborhood events, which she had hoped would foster goodwill, failed to materialize. Even casual interactions at local shops became strained, as whispers followed her. It was clear that Karen's narrative, that Hannah was a disruptive outsider bent on undermining community values, had taken root in certain circles. Hannah confided in Marissa that the isolation was wearing on her. "They want you to feel alone," Marissa said gently. "But you're not. You have allies, even if some of them are quiet for now." True to her word, subtle signs of support began to emerge. The independent inspector who had helped prepare for the city visit reached out, offering to serve as a witness if needed. The police patrols near Hannah's home became more frequent, a quiet signal of institutional awareness. And one evening, an elderly neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Evelyn, knocked on Hannah's door. "I just wanted you to know," Evelyn said softly. "Not everyone agrees with what's happening. Some of us remember what it means to be a good neighbor." The gesture, simple though it was, buoyed Hannah's spirits. Even as the personal attacks continued, Hannah remained strategic. On Marissa's recommendation, she filed a formal complaint with the state's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, citing potential violations of her rights as a homeowner. The move added another layer of official scrutiny to the situation, one that Karen could not easily dismiss. It was during this period that the most audacious act of harassment occurred. Returning home late one evening from a business meeting, Hannah discovered that her mailbox had been tampered with. Its lock forcibly removed, the interior ransacked. Among the scattered contents was a torn copy of her mortgage statement, its pages defaced with crude, threatening scrawls. The message was unmistakable. "You don't belong here." Hannah contacted the police immediately. The responding officer treated the incident as a criminal matter, launching an official investigation. The escalation from petty vandalism to overt threats marked a dangerous new phase. Marissa convened an urgent strategy session. "This isn't just about nuisance anymore," she said. "It's about intimidation, possibly criminal conspiracy. We need to be prepared for a full legal confrontation." Hannah agreed. The next steps were clear: increase security measures, deepen legal documentation, and begin laying the groundwork for potential civil action against Karen and any co-conspirators. Meanwhile, the psychological warfare continued. More delivery cancellations, more false complaints, more anonymous letters. Yet, through it all, Hannah's resolve only hardened. Each attack confirmed what she already knew, that Karen feared her presence because it represented change, independence, and a refusal to bow to the old guard. The middle point of the conflict crystallized when the city's follow-up report from the inspection arrived. No violations found, no further action required. It was a decisive blow to Karen's narrative, a formal acknowledgement that Hannah was in full compliance with all regulations. But the victory, while satisfying, was also a signal that the battle was entering its next, more dangerous phase. Karen, thwarted in her efforts to leverage municipal power, would now likely resort to more personal and desperate tactics. Hannah was ready. She had built her defense methodically, surrounded herself with capable allies, and fortified her resolve. The fight for her home, her rights, and her place in the community was far from over. But for the first time since moving in, she sensed the tide beginning to turn, and she intended to see it through to the end. The official clearance from the city should have been the beginning of the end, the moment when reason prevailed and the baseless harassment abated. But for Karen Ellis, it was a public defeat that demanded retaliation. Hannah sensed the shift almost immediately. Where the prior waves of harassment had relied on procedural manipulations and social engineering, the new tactics were raw, more personal, stripped of the veneer of community concern. They spoke not of a campaign to uphold neighborhood values, but of a vendetta, of one woman's refusal to accept that her target would not be driven out. It began subtly enough. One morning, Hannah's landscapers, Those few contractors still willing to work with her despite the neighborhood's whispered warnings arrived to find that several sprinkler heads had been smashed, their components strewn across the lawn. A simple act of vandalism, easily repairable, but the message was clear. When Hannah reviewed the footage from her newly installed security cameras, she caught the faint outline of a figure crossing the yard in the pre-dawn hours. Face obscured, gait familiar. The footage lacked the clarity to serve as conclusive evidence, but Hannah forwarded it to the police regardless. The investigating officer, one who had responded to her calls before, took the matter seriously. "This is escalating," he warned. "They're probing for weaknesses. Be vigilant." Days later, the harassment crossed another line. A utility shutoff notice arrived in the mail, informing Hannah that her water service would be disconnected due to non-payment. Knowing full well that her account was current, she had verified every bill twice since the campaign began, Hannah contacted the utility company. After a lengthy call and some internal checks, a supervisor confirmed her suspicion. Someone had called in posing as her, attempting to change the billing information and submit a false shutoff request. The company flagged the account for fraud and restored service, but the incident underscored how determined her harassers had become. That evening, Hannah met with Marissa to recalibrate their legal strategy. "We're past the point of neighborhood politics," Marissa said grimly. "This is targeted criminal harassment. We need to prepare for the possibility of civil litigation, and if necessary, press for criminal charges." Hannah agreed. It was no longer about simply defending her right to live in peace. It was about holding those responsible to account. Marissa filed a formal criminal harassment complaint with the district attorney's office, backed by the growing dossier of incidents Hannah had meticulously documented. The police increased their patrols around Hannah's home, while Marissa expanded her outreach to state-level housing authorities. The hope was to apply pressure on multiple fronts, forcing Karen and any accomplices to reconsider their actions. But as the legal gears began to turn, the campaign against Hannah only intensified. One evening, returning from a business trip, Hannah discovered that her driveway had been blocked with a pile of broken branches and yard waste, deliberately dumped to impede access. As she cleared the debris, she found among the refuse a crudely scrawled note. "Move while you can." The threat was undeniable. Hannah reported it immediately, and the police treated it as evidence of criminal intimidation. Still, without clear footage of the perpetrator, direct action against Karen remained elusive. Meanwhile, the social isolation grew more pronounced. Flyers appeared on community bulletin boards and in mailboxes, unsigned but unmistakably linked to Karen's inner circle, accusing Hannah of bringing litigation and division to the neighborhood. Local businesses that once welcomed her now served her with frosty indifference. Even casual trips to the grocery store became fraught with cold stares and whispered judgments. Yet Hannah remained undeterred. "They want me to retreat," she told Marissa. "I won't give them that satisfaction." The most brazen attack came late one night. Hannah awoke to the blaring of her security alarm. When she reviewed the footage, her blood ran cold. A group of masked individuals had approached her garage under cover of darkness, attempting to force entry. The alarm had triggered before they could succeed, sending them fleeing into the night. The police response was swift, but the intruders were gone. The incident marked a chilling escalation from harassment to attempted home invasion. The police treated it as a serious felony, launching a full investigation. Patrols were increased, and Hannah's home became a near-constant point of surveillance for law enforcement. In response, Marissa moved to file for an emergency restraining order against Karen, citing the cumulative pattern of harassment and the clear escalation to criminal acts. The court hearing was set for the following week, a pivotal moment that would either curtail Karen's influence or embolden her further. As preparations for the hearing progressed, another front opened. Hannah received a formal letter from a local law firm. one known to be affiliated with Karen's husband's business associates, alleging that her presence in the neighborhood was causing emotional distress to the community and threatening a civil suit, unless she agreed to sell the property and leave. The demand was preposterous, legally baseless, but its intent was clear: to intimidate her into submission through the threat of protracted litigation. Marissa responded with swift legal countermeasures, filing a motion to dismiss any such claims as frivolous and retaliatory. "This is an abuse of process," she told Hannah. "We'll not only fight it, we'll expose it." Meanwhile, public opinion in the neighborhood began to shift. The blatant criminal acts had alarmed even those previously sympathetic to Karen's cause. Quietly, a few residents began reaching out to Hannah, expressing support and dismay at the direction things had taken. Evelyn, the retired teacher who had visited weeks earlier, became an unexpected ally, rallying a small but growing group of neighbors willing to speak out against the harassment. As the hearing date approached, tensions reached a fever pitch. On the eve of the court appearance, Hannah returned home to find a large sign staked into her front lawn: "Community rejects outsiders." It was a final, desperate act of provocation. Hannah calmly photographed the sign, removed it, and added it to her growing case file. The next morning, accompanied by Marissa and a plainclothes security officer hired for the occasion, Hannah entered the courthouse. The hearing was contentious. Karen, defiant and unrepentant, denied direct involvement in the harassment, but could not explain away the pattern of events linked to her and her known associates. The judge, noting the severity of the situation, granted the restraining order, prohibiting Karen from any further contact or proximity to Hannah's property. It was a significant victory, a formal acknowledgement that the campaign against Hannah had crossed legal boundaries. Yet it was not the end. "She won't stop entirely," Marissa cautioned, "but now she's exposed. Any further moves will carry real consequences." Hannah nodded. She was prepared. The second escalation had reached its apex, and though the battle was far from over, the balance of power had begun to shift. No longer merely defending her right to live in peace, Hannah was now poised to take the fight to those who had sought to destroy her sense of safety and belonging. The next moves would be critical, and Hannah was ready to make them. The granting of the restraining order against Karen Ellis marked a turning point, both legally and psychologically, yet neither Hannah nor Marissa entertained any illusions that the battle was finished. If anything, the order served to further humiliate Karen, who had built her identity on unchallenged dominance within the neighborhood. Predictably, the immediate aftermath was marked by a tense, simmering hostility. Karen ceased her overt actions, wary of violating the court's decree, but her allies remained active, their tactics growing subtler, more insidious. In the weeks that followed, Hannah noticed an uptick in strange occurrences: anonymous calls to her work number at odd hours, unexplained technical glitches with her email and online accounts, and suspicious activity flagged by her home security. System. The message was clear. Though legally restrained, the campaign to unnerve her continued through proxies and indirect means. Marissa remained vigilant, coordinating closely with the local law enforcement and pushing forward with the broader legal strategy. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office had begun its own investigation into the pattern of harassment, driven in part by the alarming escalation to attempted home invasion. The mounting scrutiny placed Karen under increasing pressure, yet it also seemed to inflame her determination. One afternoon, while reviewing camera footage, Hannah captured a chilling image: a figure in a hooded sweatshirt loitering near her back fence, staring toward the house before disappearing into the shadows. Though the figure's identity could not be confirmed, the timing, mere days after the restraining order, was no coincidence. The tension reached a new crescendo when Hannah received an unexpected visit from two plainclothes detectives working on the district attorney's task force. They informed her that evidence had surfaced suggesting Karen had been in contact with a known local fixer, a man with a reputation for facilitating property clearances in contentious real estate disputes. The implication was sobering. Karen's vendetta had moved beyond personal spite into potentially criminal conspiracy. In light of this development, the detectives advised Hannah to temporarily vacate the property while they conducted further surveillance and built their case. The suggestion was prudent, but Hannah balked at the thought of being driven from her home. After consulting with Marissa, they reached a compromise. Hannah would remain, but with enhanced private security and a direct line to the task force for any emergencies. The following days were marked by an uneasy calm. Patrol cars lingered longer on the block, and a discreet security team monitored the property around the clock. Despite these precautions, the atmosphere remained fraught, the threat of further escalation ever present. Then, late one night, the situation boiled over. Hannah was in her study when the alarm system triggered, lights flaring across the property. She rushed to the monitors and saw a group of masked individuals attempting once again to breach her garage, their movements hurried but purposeful. She hit the panic button, alerting both her security team and the police. Within minutes, sirens pierced the night as multiple units converged on the scene. The intruders scattered, 2 of them tackled and apprehended by responding officers. The arrests marked a dramatic turning point. Under interrogation, one of the suspects confessed to being hired through an intermediary linked to the same fixer the detectives had identified. The trail led directly back to Karen's network, providing the district attorney's office with the evidence needed to pursue conspiracy charges. Word of the arrests spread quickly through the neighborhood, sending shockwaves through the once complacent social circles Karen had dominated. The veneer of respectability she had so carefully cultivated began to crumble, replaced by whispers of criminality and reckless obsession. As news of the investigation became public, several of Karen's former allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be caught in the widening net. Evelyn and her informal group of supportive neighbors grew more vocal, publicly denouncing the harassment and rallying community sentiment in Hannah's favor. The shift was palpable. Where once Hannah had been met with cold stares and avoidance, now she received cautious nods, murmured words of support, and occasional offers of assistance. The tide of public opinion, so long manipulated by Karen's narrative, had begun to turn decisively. Amidst this maelstrom, the district attorney's office moved swiftly, filing formal charges against Karen and several associates for conspiracy to commit harassment, attempted unlawful entry, and related offenses. The indictments sent a clear message. The era of unchecked intimidation was over. Karen, once the unassailable queen of the neighborhood, now faced the full weight of the legal system. For Hannah, the victory was hard-won and bittersweet. The ordeal had tested her resilience, her resolve, and her very sense of safety. Yet she had stood firm, refusing to yield to fear or coercion. As she stood on her porch one crisp morning, watching a new day unfold over the now quiet street, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The battle was not yet fully concluded. Court proceedings lay ahead, and the scars of the conflict would take time to heal. But the balance had irrevocably shifted. No longer the isolated newcomer, Hannah had forged bonds within the community, rallied institutional support, and reclaimed her rightful place in the neighborhood. The culmination of the conflict had revealed not only the depths of Karen's malice but also the strength of Hannah's character. In the face of calculated intimidation, she had chosen principle over capitulation, law over vengeance. And as the legal process advanced, promising further accountability for those who had sought to destroy her peace, Hannah knew one truth with unshakable certainty. She had won not merely the right to remain in her home, but the respect and recognition of a community that had at last seen through the lies. Oh, the storm had passed. Now, at last, the work of rebuilding could begin. The weeks that followed the arrests and the formal charges against Karen Ellis brought an unfamiliar quiet to the neighborhood, one that felt both welcome and strangely fragile. Hannah remained cautious, fully aware that while the legal process had decisively shifted the balance of power, the scars left by months of harassment would not fade overnight. Yet, beneath the surface, subtle but meaningful changes began to take root. The once hostile glances from neighbors gradually gave way to hesitant nods, and eventually to polite greetings. A few of the more courageous residents, emboldened by Karen's fall from grace, reached out more openly. Evelyn, steadfast throughout the ordeal, organized a small gathering of supportive neighbors, inviting Hannah to attend. At first, Hannah hesitated, wary of public attention, but Marissa encouraged her to go, reminding her that reclaiming her place in the community was as much a part of healing as securing legal victories. The gathering was modest, a casual afternoon in Evelyn's backyard, but it marked a turning point. Over shared food and conversation, Hannah listened as neighbors expressed their regret for not speaking out sooner, for allowing fear of Karen's influence to dictate their silence. Some admitted they had believed the false narrative spread early on, while others confessed they had simply been afraid to oppose someone who had, for so long, controlled the social dynamics of the neighborhood. Hannah, understanding the complex web of intimidation that had bound them, chose grace over resentment. She spoke candidly about her experiences, not to garner sympathy, but to affirm the importance of standing up for what was right, even when the path was isolating and fraught with uncertainty. In the legal arena, the proceedings against Karen and her associates advanced steadily. Marissa kept Hannah informed of every development, ensuring that she remained an active participant in the pursuit of justice. Though the wheels of the legal system turned slowly, the direction was clear, and the mounting evidence left little doubt of the eventual outcome. Karen, once the architect of Hannah's torment, now faced the prospect of significant legal and financial consequences. The spectacle of her downfall served as a powerful deterrent to those who might have otherwise sought to perpetuate the old order of fear and exclusion. As spring edged into summer, the atmosphere of the neighborhood transformed. Where once Karen's clique had held sway, new voices began to emerge. Residents who valued transparency, fairness, and genuine community spirit over coercion and control. A movement took shape, informal at first, but increasingly organized, dedicated to fostering a more inclusive and welcoming environment. Encouraged by Marissa and buoyed by the support of her growing circle of allies, Hannah agreed to participate in this effort, not as a crusader, but as a neighbor committed to helping her community heal and grow. One warm Saturday, several weeks after the court hearings had begun, Hannah hosted her own gathering, a casual, open house welcoming anyone who wished to stop by, share a drink, and get to know one another beyond the divisions of the past. The turnout exceeded her expectations. Families arrived with children in tow, couples brought homemade dishes, and even some of the more reserved residents made an appearance. The event unfolded with laughter, conversation, and a shared sense of renewal. As the sun dipped low and lanterns flickered to life on her porch, Hannah stood amidst the crowd, reflecting on how far things had come. Later that evening, as the last guest departed and the house grew quiet, Hannah sat on her porch, a glass of wine in hand, watching the soft glow of streetlights along the tree-lined road. The fear and tension that had once haunted these nights had been replaced by a calm determination, a sense of belonging forged not through conformity, but through resilience and integrity. The house that had once been the center of so much conflict now felt truly like home, a place earned not just through purchase, but through the steadfast defense of her rights and values. Marissa, visiting the following week to review the latest court filings, remarked on the transformation. "You've done more than defend your home," she said. "You've changed the fabric of this place. People see that now." Hannah smiled, acknowledging the truth of the words, but mindful that vigilance remained necessary. The legal battle was not yet fully resolved, and remnants of the old guard lingered, their influence diminished but not entirely extinguished. Yet, for the first time since her arrival, Hannah no longer felt alone in that fight. She had allies, a voice within the community, and a deepened understanding of both the fragility and the strength of neighborhood bonds. As the seasons continued to turn, the rhythm of life in the neighborhood settled into a new equilibrium. The once dominant culture of fear gave way to one of cautious optimism. New residents arrived, drawn by the charm of the area and reassured by the changes taking place. Hannah, now an integral part of the community's evolution, remained a steady presence, welcoming, watchful, and unwavering in her commitment to ensuring that no one else would endure what she had faced. In the quiet moments, alone in her garden or sharing stories with newfound friends, Hannah often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It had been long, arduous, and at times harrowing, but it had also revealed depths of strength and resilience she had not fully known she possessed. And though the path had been forged through conflict, it had led her to a place of hard-won peace, a home not merely of bricks and mortar, but of trust, community, and the unassailable certainty that she belonged.